Basically, once I got to high school and discovered girls and music and punk rock and metal and partying, then there were just too many distractions for my brain to like handle, and I just never went back to being the same kid.
Oh my god.
6 months into college, maybe, or 4 to 6 months into college, my friend, we were playing poker, and he just puts on a song, and I'm just like, dude, what the fuck is this?
What's the song?
You can go either way, you know. Like
Yeah.
if you're a Indian or an Asian kid and you say, Dad, I want to be a DJ, I mean, you can go pretty bad.
Hi, this is Lauren Engel of Sidewalk Talk. Today I'm here with Gurbax.
What's up? How's it going, guys?
So you were born in the US, in
Yes.
LA,
Yes.
and then, so you lived here for a bit. So it's your parents' job, or?
Yeah, so my dad was actually the first of his entire family of like 8 or 9 siblings to leave the country. No one had ever done that. So he ended up leaving the country and doing his master's in New Jersey and stayed on to work. Eventually came back to India, got married, brought my mom over to the US, shuffled around the East Coast, West Coast quite a bit. He was in construction.
Oh.
And eventually had me here in LA in 91. Then we moved to the Bay Area and had my brother, and then we moved back to India in 96. So I was like 5 years old when we moved straight to Bangalore.
And that was for his job to go back to Bangalore.
He found a lot more business opportunities in India.
Oh, interesting.
And he's kind of like, you know, I guess he was done with construction. He's kind of like he's been a serial entrepreneur his entire life, and you know, he's someone that I've always strived to, you know, get to his level. But so he essentially made the call to move us to India and then, you know, get us in schools there and essentially
What is
grow
he
up.
working on now?
Right now he's in real estate, but he's, like I said, he's pretty much started businesses in 10 different industries and killed it at all of them.
Wow.
He's like the most like street smart and intelligent guy I've known. So,
Wow, I have a great mentor, Dad, for
I mean,
anything.
For sure. I love you, Dad. So, this is dangerous.
Yeah. I'm so used to it though.
Yeah.
How do you describe yourself back then growing up in Bangalore?
Well, I think like I went through like 2 distinct sort of phases when I was growing up. The first phase was like pre-middle school. I was very shy, like quiet, kind of like reserved kid that was just, you know, focused on like schoolwork and, you know, just doing well in school and coming back home, playing some cricket outside and then going back home. I mean, that's kind of what life was restricted to up until middle school. So that's all I pretty much knew. I mean, you know, like curfews and stuff with like Indian or you know, Asian parents. So, but then once I got to high school and basically once I got to high school and discovered girls and music and punk rock and metal and partying, then there were just too many distractions for my brain to like handle, and I just never went back to being the same kid.
Oh my god.
Like they fired off like certain like sensory receptors in my brain that were like deactivated for a long time, and then suddenly school just went down in importance. So
What did your like parents think? Were they pushing academically like really, really hard?
Oh, for sure. I mean, see, back then, like, I never really did music seriously. I played guitar a bit in school. We had a small school band that performed at a few competitions and stuff. We did decent. There was no original music coming out, but I mean, I didn't really have this sort of the drive towards music to even dispute my parents from them saying, go do engineering or go become a doctor. So my dad left it open, but then at the end of the day, I mean, if I'm not passionate enough at that time, if I wasn't passionate enough to say this is what I wanted to do, then he's gonna say, okay, do engineering.
So how did you even get into punk rock? Like, is that really common in India?
Well, not really, not very common. I mean, my friend circle sort of was the people that pushed me into it and got me exposure the first time. And again, I mean, the internet was there, so LimeWire, Kazaa, all those softwares that were just about coming out at that time got me, you know, straight up exposure to it, and that's kind of how I got into it.
Were you going to like a private or like a public school?
private school. So in
So
India,
they have
yeah.
like international kids and everyone?
No international
Okay.
kids. So in India you have public schools, which is the government schools, which are really like quite bad. Then you have private schools, which are like the only sort of decent schools that say like middle class kid would go to. And then you have the international schools, which aren't the Indian curriculum. They have the IBs
Oh, yeah, I
and
did
the
that.
A levels. So I was in private school.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then what kind of music was played in the house when you were growing up?
So in my house, there actually wasn't a lot of music being played. My dad kind of was the kind of guy that like, if you're on a road trip with family, he'd want like silence in the car. So he would not want the radio on. That's the last thing he would want on. And so I didn't really like have much music playing in my house while growing up. All the exposure came from the internet and some friends of mine that were into it at that time. But generally speaking, my dad he played a little bit of like tabla growing up. Tabla is like an Indian percussive instrument. So he was, let's say like a casual listener of music, not someone who was constantly playing it at all times.
Oh.
Yeah. So,
And then how did you decide to go to school in Atlanta?
well, I knew I wanted to leave Bangalore and venture out. Atlanta, to be honest, I mean, simple answer is that it's the best school I got into was Georgia Tech in Atlanta.
Oh, okay.
And that's how it just happened. I mean, I got into maybe like 3 or 4 schools. There was Georgia Tech, there was UIUC, there was, I think one of the UCs also, UC
Oh.
Davis or some of them, one of them. And even Claremont McKenna, which is also in LA actually.
Oh.
But yeah, I ended up choosing Georgia Tech because it was like the highest ranked school. And
Yeah. For what major?
For engineering.
Oh.
Yeah.
So did you actually really like engineering back then?
No, it was just like, I
Was
mean,
it-
I didn't
it was
have
easy
like,
for you, like the.
well, I mean, I didn't have like a interest towards it, but then it kind of left the most options open, right? Like with engineering, you could do a bunch of different things. So I was trying to just keep options open at that point.
Yeah.
Instead of like pigeonholing myself and saying, okay, let's go do law, or let's go be a doctor, or let's do medicine, So, yeah, that's kind of
So you
what
didn't specialize in a type of engineering?
I did. So initially I was undecided, but then I finally graduated in industrial engineering.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
But then you got more and more into like electronic music in college.
Yeah. So, I mean, to be honest, being in college in Atlanta, like, the college aspect of my experience, like, to be honest, I hated, but everything else, aside from the college stuff, was stuff that I really, really got into. Like, I started going to a lot of shows, and honestly, got exposed to things that, like music that I never experienced before in Bangalore. So if I was to backtrack a bit, like the Bangalore music scene at that point was like one international artist touring every like 3 years, okay?
Yeah.
Coming to Bangalore every 3 years, and 4 out of 5 times that'll be Bryan Adams. Coming back, he keeps coming back. I guess he doesn't get enough shows over here, so he keeps coming back to India and Pakistan to play shows.
Oh my God.
No offense to Bryan Adams, but I mean, there was no like diversity.
Yeah.
There was no diversity. There was no electronic music. There was, at that point, I hated electronic music because I thought that the only electronic music was like big room house.
Oh, yeah.
And that, I'm coming from like a rock and metal background. That's something that didn't like vibe with me at all.
Yeah.
Basically get thrown into this world of, shows and like music every weekend, and you get to go and, visit different venues and see not only one style of music, but like 10 different styles of music. So in the first like 5 or 6 months while I was in college, my freshman year, I spent that time going to every single metal show I could go to.
Oh my gosh.
Because I was like, imagine, I was a metalhead for like 2
Yeah.
years. It was just built up for so long that I just said, that's it, this is all I'm doing on weekends.
Yeah.
And then 6 months into college maybe, or 4 to 6 months into college, my friend, we were playing poker, and he just puts on a song, and I'm just like, dude, what the fuck is this?
What's the song?
And
Do you remember?
he's like, dude, it's Hot Like Sauce by Pretty Lights. And I was like, what is this? Like, how does this even made? Like, what is going on here? because it was just like, it was electronic, but I didn't understand how it was kind of organic at the same time.
Yeah.
You know, but I never heard like that sort of fusion of different elements before, and that's kind of got me on the path to exploring more and more into what electronic music. And this was just in 2009.
Oh.
Yeah, 2009, probably like September or October.
So specific.
Yeah.
And then you just decided to download a producer software.
No. That came way
Oh.
later. Yeah. So I partied for a long time
Yeah.
before I got into anything serious. Like, I partied from 2009, went to a lot of shows up until like, I mean, I graduated. So, but I eventually started like DJ. Like, I bought my first like DJ equipment in 2012. Yeah.
And then what was the next step?
So after that, I got that. I DJ'd a bit here and there in college, and but I didn't know how to produce. So I knew the next step was to get into production, but I didn't know how. And I tried doing it myself, but it wasn't working out. So I ended up going to this school called Dubspot in New York City. So my last summer in college, I somehow convinced my dad to allow me to go to this school and study music production for 3
Did he
months.
pay for it?
He did.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah,
that's literally the most supportive Asian parent, honestly.
Exactly. So that's what I'm saying. I literally hit the jackpot with my parents because you can go either way. You know, like if you're a Indian or an Asian kid and you say, "Dad, I want to be a DJ," I mean, you can go pretty bad.
Yeah.
I mean, or it can just go like, okay, but rarely do you get the parents that are, go out of their way to support.
Yeah,
So
that's
my
so
dad
rare,
said that.
honestly.
I was ready to do a small course in Atlanta, but my dad said no. You should find the right place to go to.
Oh, wow.
And at that point, Dubspot was killing it.
Yeah.
They were killing it, and especially with online tutorials and everything, it was just, I mean, half of the stuff I learned was just off of Dubspot tutorials. So going there and actually learning for 3 months that was life changing. Those 3 months I spent in New York City, it was pretty much like I was high every day, but I did no drugs. Well, that's a lie. But I mean, I did. You get my point.
Yeah. And then you graduated, and then what happened?
So then I graduated, and then I had to make the choice between staying in the US and pursuing music, or coming back to India and pursuing music. So first,
So engineering was completely like off the table.
no. So what I had to do was after I graduated, I actually went and got I interviewed for jobs.
Yeah.
And I got a job just to show my dad that I could do it. But then over that sort of 3-month period of, between the last semester starting and graduation, I was kind of like planting the seed a little bit in his head that I wanted to come back and I wanted to pursue music. And it took a while to convince him, but, I finally was able to convince him. He actually wanted me to get into more of the business side of things, even if it was music. So actually, he had to like write up a full like business plan. I wrote up a whole business plan for an event company that I told him I'd start when I come to India, and he got convinced after reading that business plan that okay, maybe this guy's actually a little like, kind of passionate about it.
Yeah.
So he finally allowed me to come back, and that's how I convinced him. But it took a while.
Yeah. And then came back to Atlanta to live there, or?
No, I came back to India, to Bangalore.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
And then what happened?
So over there, I basically had to find a job first because I was not anywhere in the scene. I had no connections. I had no idea what the Bangalore scene was going to be like when I got back because I'd been away for so long.
Yeah.
I'd been away for like 5 years. But I knew kind of what I wanted to do. And what I wanted to do was sort of fill this gap in the Indian electronic music space because at that time, the electronic music space in India only had 4 on the floor music, so there was only deep house, techno in the underground space and psytrance. And on the other hand, you had like the commercial top 40, EDM, like big room stuff.
Yeah.
But there was no one doing like bass music on a visible scale at that point. There were a handful of producers maybe doing it. Some people in Delhi and Bombay were killing it, but in Bangalore, city of like 8 million people, there was no one doing it.
How big was EDM like at that time? EDM back then?
In India, it was very small, very small. Like they had, while I was in the US, there had been a few artists that toured. There was like Avicii came, Armin came, and you had the festivals, like the big festivals that are called Sunburn and Supersonic. So they had set up a sort of platform for artists, but it was nowhere near where it is today, or even like nowhere near where it was in the US at that time. You know, but the gap that was there was this complete like lack of bass music and trap and dubstep, because trap was so new. Like trap was even new over here.
Yeah.
Right? It only started in 2011ish, when trap really entered into the electronic world, right? So I wanted to go there and start off the first sort of trap, dubstep, electro hip hop like weekly event in Bangalore, and that's what I went and did.
Yeah.
I went and did that for like 4 months. I ran that at this club every Thursday night. Had to like convince the owner somehow, because no one even knew what the fuck trap was. Like I had to convince them what it was first, you know, and then he somehow gave me a Thursday night, and I begged for like a drinks deal, so that I could like promote it with my friends. So I went around flyering. He gave me like a deal where all the ladies come in and they get like free wine, you know. So I like promoted that. I got as many women as there as possible. The women obviously being the men. So it went really well. So for like four months. I mean, I went from no one knowing me at all to like at least there was some buzz in the city. Like there's this dude who's doing something different.
Yeah.
You know, and that's kind of what I wanted to do, and that's how I started getting my name out in Bangalore. In fact, Bangalore, and then later the different states in India, like all over the country.
And then did you start releasing originals, or?
Yeah. So it's crazy. I mean, it sounds like it's very simple and easy, but I came back May 2014. That's when I moved back to Bangalore, right? And Jan 2015, I was opening for Steve Aoki, like in Bangalore.
Yeah. Oh my
So it was just like, it was a very fast sort of like upward movement in terms of the shows, you know, because what I was doing back then, hardly any people were doing.
Yeah.
And I was able to sort of like cut through a little bit easier than the rest of the DJs in the city.
Was there a lot of other DJs?
Well, yeah. I mean, it has always been like quite competitive, the Indian EDM market.
For like as a hobby or like as a full-time job?
No, as a full-time job.
Oh wow.
Yeah. I mean, now.
I didn't even know Hong Kong has like full-time
people
who can afford to do it full-time and pay rent
I
and
mean,
everything.
because now that's the thing. Like DJing is a fad, right? It's like what being a guitarist or like a rock star guitarist was, 10, 15 years ago, right? Everyone wanted to play lead guitar on stage and rip a solo. Now it's a little different. Now everyone wants to DJ. So it's the fad is sort of like inflated the bubble a little bit, you know, of the number of DJs, the influx of the number of DJs, you know. So
you kind of from the onset already earning money from it, like were you?
No. The 4 months of DJing that I did was completely for free.
Oh.
And I was working at the same time. So I was working a full-time job and also doing this on Thursday nights and promoting it and like curating the night and basically like from ground up conceptualizing the whole thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Wait, so sorry, the job was your event or a separate job?
No. The job was a separate job. So I was working at this like online radio company that provided radio like music to stores. So like say you walk into a Nike or you walk into a Reebok or Adidas or any store for that matter, you hear music, right?
Yeah.
So these guys like curated the music and streamed it to the stores essentially.
Right.
Yeah. So I was working over there for the first like 4 months.
And what did you do for them?
Essentially just interface with the client and got them what kind of music they wanted. Some of them wanted Bollywood music.
Yeah.
Some of them wanted like more niche electronic music. Some of them wanted like classic rock. So I just have to sort of like pick and choose and do. It was just like a monkey could do the job. I mean literally. I mean like I'm making it sound like it's something amazing. It's not. It was quite stupid to be honest. I hated it. It took time away from me making music and me preparing for shows and me doing what I really want to do. But I had to do that because at that point I was not busy enough to warrant doing music full time. You know,
Yeah.
like you got to be busy enough. I
Yeah.
feel, right? So I had to do that at that time. But after 4 months, I decided it was, kind of cutting into too much of my time, and things had slowly picked up. So I thought, let's just close this chapter.
Yeah. And then what was the next step?
Next step was like making music non-stop, releasing music, and around that time I also released this track of mine called Boom Shankar, which has done exceptionally well.
Oh yeah, on YouTube.
Yeah. So that track sort of like gave me the platform to get more shows and more and play on bigger stages, and I mean that track's probably been my sort of stepping stone into a more serious place in the industry out there. Right?
And how do you call like Desi Trap or?
Yeah, so Desi is like
Desi.
Indian,
Yeah.
Trap is Trap.
Yeah.
So yeah, Desi Trap.
But you kind
So-
of knew from the onset that you wanted to make that genre.
No,
or-
not really actually. I mean, me moving back to India, I obviously had an impact on the kind of music that I was going to make. And I to be honest, I don't only make that. I make a lot of other stuff. Like I said, I'm very influenced by the electro hip hop soul movement that's going on over here with Pretty Lights, Dramatic, Grizz,
Yeah.
Big Gigantic, like all those guys are like big inspirations. So I do some of that stuff. I do this Desi Trap stuff and down tempo stuff. Like there's just I'm kind of like spread out into almost all forms of like broken beat electronic music right now. But Desi Trap is working out there because Desi has the Indian influence,
Yeah.
and people want the Indian influence, right? I mean, everyone's a Bollywood fanatic in India. Everyone wants something Indian, and this allowed me to like sort of tap into that or the mass, as you'd say, or the mainstream audience, but give them something fresh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now you're still living back there, or? Yeah.
I'm still living back there. This is actually the first time I'm coming back in 3 years. I came
wow.
back once to drop my brother off to college, and that was in 2015. Now I'm back after 3 years, and I'm doing like a string of shows. So tomorrow I'm headed to Purdue to play
Yeah.
Purdue University.
Wow, nice.
Yeah.
How would you say you've grown as a person compared to when you were younger?
When I was younger, like as a
teenage years.
Oh, teenage years. Okay. I guess like the main thing I feel like I'm a lot more confident now about like just being independent and not having to sort of like hesitate when asked about what you want to do in life.
Oh, yeah.
And basically like the main thing I think for me is just confidence. Like I was not a very confident person before when I was kind of like wavering in my direction, when I didn't know what I wanted to do. But now things are very clear in my head as to like where I need to be, and I feel like that allows for you to be more confident as a person in general, right? Like when you're talking to people, when you're like even working, there's like a grip that you feel that I feel like I have on what I'm doing now.
And what was the turning point that your parents finally were supportive?
No, so they've always been supportive.
Like
They started off
to be a full-time job. You know what I mean? Asian parents.
So they were passively supportive in the beginning.
Exactly.
They're like, all right, let him do his thing. Maybe he'll like fizzle out, and
Yeah.
then he won't have to. Then he can't say anything, right?
Yeah. When it's a full-time job, it's a different story. I know it.
Right. I mean, it was. I don't think there was one like clear point. I think like, see, for Indian parents, they have to see something tangible, right? So it's not about me coming back home and talking to my parents saying, oh my god, this show is amazing. This is exactly what I want to do.
Yeah.
Or maybe this sick track, and you listen to it. For them, it's about me going them and showing them a newspaper article.
Yeah.
Right? Then they see, okay, maybe
Or
it's
how much money
legitimate.
you made.
Yeah, or how much money you make. Or like, oh, he has 8 million plays. Oh, okay, maybe something is good.
Yeah.
Like maybe something good is happening. So it's all about the tangible things over a couple of years. Finally showed them that, okay, this is here to stay. In a way, There's nothing that anyone can do about it.
What would you say was your most challenging moment so far? Could be in personal life too.
I mean, I think it goes back to what we were talking about. It's like I had a lot of self-doubt getting into this because I'm not a musician. Like I mean, I played guitar, but I wasn't very good at it. I didn't really have I didn't have a musical upbringing, right? And I started off really late. I mean, I started producing 2013, which is only like 5 years ago. And I just didn't know whether I had the skill set to make good music, you know? And that period of you know, the first 3 or 4 years was extremely challenging because there's just so much self-doubt on top of the fact that you have to succeed. But if you doubt your own skill set, you know, then it's like, how do you even think about succeeding? You know, if you don't even know if you can do it. So I think that period was probably the most challenging. I mean, it's something I still deal with every day. Like self-doubt doesn't go away, obviously, but it's definitely like decreased, you know. So yeah, I think that was that's probably what it is. Yeah.
What does love mean to you?
What does love mean to me?
Yeah.
Oof, it's
a hard questions now.
That's heavy. See, I think external love is very subjective. Like when you love someone or you love like a certain thing, I think or you love a place, I think that's very subjective. But I think for me, like love that comes from within is kind of what I feel allows you to be sort of what's the word for it? Kind of disaffected from everyone around you. You know what I'm saying? I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Maybe it's too woke, but
just explain a bit
like
more.
If you understand like who you are as a person, and if you understand what makes you happy, and if you love yourself, then what you do, and so you can just exist by yourself without anyone else's support or anyone else's approval.
Yeah.
Right? And I feel like that's what I found when I started making music and DJing. Like suddenly I didn't feel the need to, you know, I have to be with friends to distract myself or like, you know, go to parties or do any of the stuff that, you know, generally seems like a waste of time. Everything almost seems like a waste of time after that. Right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think like in the love that comes from within is more important than the love that's external.
Yeah, I think I know what you mean.
Right?
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah?
Last question. What do you want to be remembered for?
So I think to answer that, I think like I have to kind of I have to look within and see what like music did for me to really understand how to duplicate that for other people. And for me, I mean, music like created these like sort of like intangible moments that you can't really explain or translate into words. And in those moments, you kind of feel like, you know, the real world kind of like fades away. Like especially imagine seeing your favorite artist play your favorite song at your favorite festival. You know, that moment, right, is just so strong. It's so like hard to describe, where like, you know, you just suddenly feel like everything, your pain and all the worries you had in life are sort of just fading away. And I think just recreating those moments for other people. Yeah. Like those tangible moments, those memories, those experiences that don't have an expiration date.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.